a question to about 30 seconds. Everyone's there. And let me answer any question that's the third rule is that this room is vacated by 6 p.m. There's another room coming in here at 6 p.m. And last but not least, I ask that the speaker and audience show courtesy and respect to each other at all times. It's okay if the debate is lively or even a little heated, but I ask that we show polite to the opposition. Politeness to the opposition. So without any further ado, we will get started with the debate.
I just promise you I will not get heated. I respect Dr. Arbib and I respect you as well. I'm here to present the case for creation. My name is Bill Morgan. I'm very glad to be here today. And this is a debate I would have loved to have gone to when I was in college. When I was in college, I believed the theory of evolution was good, solid science, and I also had to be an atheist. When I was your age, I didn't believe in God, and I thought evolution was not even an issue that science had proven it. But I would have been very interested to come to a debate like this just to hear what the creation guy would have to say and to check it out. So here I am about 25 years later as a creation guy talking for the creation. But I'm sure there's some people here who do think the theory of evolution is true, and perhaps you're an atheist. And if you do believe that, I'm going to say something that might surprise you. What I'd like to say is not to believe anything I'm going to tell you. Don't believe a word of it, but I encourage you to listen to it. Listen to what I have to say, compare it to your current beliefs, and then you decide what to believe. Because I'm not here to brainwash anybody just because I have a tie and a podium. You have to listen to me and believe me. I just encourage you. Oh, do those lights be turned back on? No, more time. Okay. It was good. Can I have the clock stop a little bit? Okay. All right. I don't know how that happened. But anyways, you guys decide what to believe. It's your life, but I think you should hear both sides. My story was I heard nothing but the theory of evolution from kindergarten, and I never got a shred of evidence for creation until I was 26 years old. I was curious enough to look into it further and further, and I do believe it's the best explanation, but you guys decide for yourselves. Now, it's important to get some definitions out of the way real quickly. What is an atheist? Well, I'll answer for you. An atheist is someone who says they do not believe in any deity such as a God. What is an evolutionist? An evolutionist is someone who thinks they have apes in their family tree. They're going to argue vigorously for that. Now, just because someone is an evolutionist, does that mean they're an atheist? No, absolutely not. I truly don't know what Dr. Arbib believes. I don't know what his beliefs are. I'll let him explain his side. But as a creationist, I do not believe the theory of evolution happened in the past, and neither am I an atheist. Okay. The most important part of science begins with the letter O. And that word is observation. But there's several steps to the scientific method. I've reduced it to 3 simple steps. The first step in science, the fancy word is hypothesis, fancy word for idea. You come up with an idea in your head. What do you do next? You test it. You test your idea to see if it's a good idea or a bad idea, and how do you test it? By making observations. And after you've made observations, you come up with your conclusion. Imagine there's 2 different scientists. I have a scientist to my left and a scientist to my right, and they disagree on something. They have 2 different hypotheses. One believes that this pen can fly. The other one is adamant that if you drop this pen, it will fall to the ground every single time. 2 different ideas. What's the next step in science? We test it. We drop the pen. 1, 100, a million, a billion, 100 billion, 100 trillion times we drop the pen. It falls to the ground every single time. Does it mean the other scientists would necessarily abandon their hypothesis? Not necessarily. It is called closed-minded. Some people are not open to the evidence. They're in love with their hypothesis, they're married to their hypothesis, and they will never divorce their hypothesis. They don't care what the observational evidence is. Well, imagine there's 2 different scientists. One scientist believes that you have ape-like ancestors, whereas the other scientist believes apes can only make what? People can only come from. Okay, 2 different ideas. That's great. What's the next step in science? We test it. We make observations. We start with you guys. You're humans, your parents are humans, your grandparents are humans, your great-grandparents are humans. As far back as we go, nothing but humans in the family tree. We look at the 6 billion people on this planet. As far back as we go, nothing but humans. Trillions of pieces for evidence for the creation side. Well, let's look at bacteria. They're a lot faster reproducing than we are. They can reproduce within 20 minutes. You go from 1 to 1 billion in 10 hours. So we look at bacteria. We studied for a few years. It's making nothing but what? Bees are making bees, fleas are making fleas, trees are making trees. Hundreds of trillions of pieces of evidence for creation. Well, then we look at the dead stuff, the fossils. There are trillions of fossils. Where are the half legs, half wings, half scales, half feathers? Where all the transitional forms of the theory of evolution is true. So the creation guide gives more evidence than the evolution guide. Then we look at the wonderful field of genetics. You have DNA. When you fall in love and get married, you can only produce what? A human. Bacteria has DNA. It can only produce bacteria. Dogs make dogs. Hogs make hogs. Frogs make frogs. Genetics, biochemistry, taxonomy, zoology, paleontology, the fossil record, living evidence, all evidence for creation. Does it mean that someone would necessarily change their mind? Not necessarily, but they have to ask themselves, and you have to ask yourself as well. If you do believe the theory of evolution is true, how did you reach your conclusion? Was it based upon observational evidence, or are you in love with the hypothesis? You can answer that for yourself. Here's an important quote. This is from the USC biology textbook. Page 516, they're talking about the first life. Very important quote, Campbell's 6th edition. The book states, what was their origin? We will never know for sure, of course, how life on Earth began. But science seeks natural causes for natural phenomena, and that is the approach that must guide scientific inquiry about the origin of life. Why must it? Who says it must? Who made them in charge? I think science should find the best explanation. It shouldn't always say, well, we'll consider any explanation for the origin of life as long as it's natural. I read the biology textbook. They're talking about life coming from outer space, from clay, from deep ocean vents, but they're not willing to consider that a supernatural intelligent designer originated life. I say be open-minded to all arguments and see what best fits the evidence. So the goal of this author, Campbell's the editor, is his goal truth? Or is it defending a natural explanation for the origin of life? Science should guide you to the conclusion, not your presupposition, not your hypothesis. Observational evidence should. Okay, so I'm a creationist. If someone were to ask me why am I a creationist, my first answer would be this: design. What do you mean by design? Well, take a look at this pen. Suppose all of us went to the middle of a jungle in New Guinea and they'd never seen a pen before. And we tried really hard to convince them that the pen happened by chance over billions of years. And I'll wave my arms when I say that. That over billions of years, the plastic just happened. The metal just happened. The ink just happened. And a cap just happens to fit on it. What do you think they say? They probably say, hey, I don't know who made it. I don't know why, and I don't know how. But somebody smart made this pen. What about this lectern? Suppose I tried to convince someone there was a tornado in a forest, and then a big flood, and just by chance this lectern happened. No, we don't know who made it, or why, or how, but somebody smart made this lectern. Now everybody hold your hand down. Be part of the debate. Hopefully a vein starts popping out of your hand. I'd like to ask you, what is your best explanation for that vein? Do you think the cells for the vein just happened? Do you think the vein just happened? Do you think the blood just happened? Do you think the vein on its way to the heart just by chance? Do you think the heart happened by chance? Do you think the nerves of the heart happened by chance? Do you think the brain that controls the nerves happened by chance? I could go on for 1,000 hours. I'd say, hey, I think the best explanation, somebody smart made the pen, somebody smart made your veins in your body, and birds, and photosynthesis, the solar system, etc. But if something's designed, that requires a designer. And that's the main reason that I'm a creationist. So the question is neither person knows. Do I know there's a designer? No. But I feel it is by far the best what? Best explanation. Both of us are trying to come up with the best explanation. Now who knows what this is? Not Mount Rushmore, it's a projection on a screen. Mount Rushmore is a few thousand miles away. Pretend I was your tour guide, and I got out my laser pen and I said, this happened over billions of years of time, nature, and chance. How long would I keep my job? I said, billions of years, doesn't that make it sound possible? We think lightning struck and made that eye, we think a bird pecked away and made that mustache, we think a glacier came by and made those lips. What would happen to my career as a tour guide? I'd be fired. Even if I worked for the federal government, which is hard to get fired from, I'd be fired. So I lose my job as a tour guide and I get hired teaching anatomy at UCLA. And you're my freshman anatomy class, and first I'd like to ask you, what's that?
Projection.
Very good. You're learning. You're becoming good scientists. Well, first I spend a week describing how the eye works. Science answers how questions. We talk about how the muscles work, the names of the parts of the eye, etc. But then we get into a little bit of philosophy about the origin of the eye. Now, how long would I keep my job at UCLA if I taught the eye muscles are the result of millions of years of beneficial mutation, natural selection, that by time, nature, and chance, eye muscles appeared? How long would I keep my job? Forever. I'm the dean of the science department or president of the university. Now, here's how I think it should be taught. And you can count how often I say Jesus, Genesis, God, or the Bible. First, they should talk about how the eye works. Then they should say this. Teach the truth. Many incredibly brilliant people believe the eye is the product of time, nature, and chance, an evolutionary process. But then they should be honest and say, however, many brilliant people with PhDs in science, and all of you, if you got the handouts, have this list, believe that there is a creator. The creation is true. The inventor of the MRI machine is a creationist. The inventor of Gatorade is a creationist, and many people in between. Sometimes people chuckle, but guess which one of those two is the multi-billionaire? The Gatorade guy. The thing is great minds disagree. I think they should teach a little bit of both sides. But I'm pretty convinced since kindergarten, you guys have been taught one side. Which side is that? The evolution side. That was my history as well. Okay, important question. Which came first? How many think a chicken? How many think an egg? Well, I tricked you. Had to be two chickens. Don't you know anything about that? You get married, you'll figure this out. A rooster and a hen. I'm going to give you the big evolution story to the chicken and the egg. Billions and billions of years ago, there was nothing. Nothing. And from nothing, up popped matter and energy. That violates the first law of thermodynamics that teaches matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. But we'll ignore that for now. And so you had this little continuum floating around in space, and it had a lot of Mexican food, got a lot of gas, blew up and filled the universe with hydrogen and helium gas. It's called the Big Burrito. I mean the Big Bang. Then you got all this. Okay. Take an extra 30 seconds. Okay, the Big Bang. So you got this gas swirling around. They teach that because of gravity, the gases came together and formed stars. So you went from gravity to fusion, the biggest free lunch in science. So then you got all these stars, and they're cooking heavier elements, and they blow up and throw heavier elements around, and the Earth comes together because of gravity. Lightning happens to zap the Earth, and non-living chemicals become life. That violates the law of phytogenesis in the cell theory, but you've got your first little critter. That little critter gets mutated, makes a 2-cell organism, a 4-cell organism, something like a fish, something like an amphibian, and a reptile. And over millions of years, you get a chicken. And they solved all their problems. No. Meiosis is a nightmare for the evolutionist. Male-female reproduction. The theory of evolution is true. Half the population evolved male stuff, and half the population evolved female stuff. But not just chickens, for bears, for insects, for fish, etc. A lot of hurdles to jump on the chicken and the egg question. I believe an intelligent designer made males fully equipped, made females fully equipped, put them at the same place at the same time, and that place had food, water, the right temperature, etc. Both sides require faith. You decide which side requires more faith. So, questions for the debate that I hope you to address? How did matter and energy originate? What's your best explanation? How did stars form? Do you believe hydrogen plus gravity equals time? How did life originate? The cell theory and the law of biogenesis teach life only comes from life. And do you believe that mutations are a mechanism to turn one organism into another? And we'll skip that for now. And I believe food's designed, water's designed, oxygen, many, many things I believe are the result of design. Now, evolutionists avoid things. They avoid details. That is my experience. I've talked to plenty. So if you meet an evolutionist, you should politely listen for detailed reasons on why they believe it. Saying it's science, saying most people believe it, is not a detailed scientific answer. Now, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. This is from an evolution source, the Encyclopedia of Evolution, and I wish everybody knew the details of the theory of evolution, no matter what their belief. I'm going to teach you details quickly. You got all this stuff living today. You got gorillas, zebras, frogs, mushrooms, trees. You're going back in time when you go in this direction. I want to teach you the details of the gorilla. So here's the gorilla. We're going back in time, and the zebra line and the gorilla line go together right there. That is teaching the zebra shares a common ancestor with the gorilla. Some offspring became zebra, some became gorilla. Is there any evidence for this animal? Any living evidence? Any fossil evidence? Why is it on the chart? You decide one. So you got further in the gorilla's family tree, this chart teaches that frogs and gorillas have a common ancestor. You go back further, an evolutionist would argue that mushrooms and gorillas share a common ancestor. It's right there. So going back to the big screen, you go back further, evolutionists would think that pine trees and gorillas share a common ancestor. And if you go all the way back, the ancient ancestor of gorilla is itty-bitty bacteria. Now, very, very important. If you remember one thought from the debate, this is what I hope you remember. If you think the theory of evolution is true, you think you have bacteria ancestors. But if you think creation is true, you think bacteria can only make bacteria, and people can only come from people. This is biochemistry, this is genetics, but you decide for yourself what you believe. Who wants to take a guess what this is? It's a projection. Very good. That's E. coli bacteria on the sharp end of a pin. That's how small bacteria is. Once again, if you think that's your ancestor, you reach that conclusion by evidence and observation, or just by your hypothesis. Some quick math. Bacteria plus mutations plus time, think big, equals blue whale. Creation believes bacteria plus mutation plus time equals mutated bacteria. Now people will say bacteria gets mutated. Yes, it is still bacteria. Very important. Okay. Quick word on mutations. Evolutionists think it makes hearts, lungs, brains, eyes, and lungs. I got to speed up. Creationists think mutations make cancer, Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis, and birth defects. That's the scientific position. Parallel lines are creation, and look at it. All the parallel lines are modern. All the evidence of transitional forms are buried in the past. Natural selection. True or false? True. Absolutely true. Suppose you own two dogs, a furry dog and a hairless dog. You go to Alaska. You're a lousy pet owner, they get away. You can't find them. They fall in love and get married, they make puppies. What are they going to make? A mixture. The Mexican hairless and the furry dog are going to make a mixture of dogs. Alaska is famous for cold, cold winters. What's going to happen? When that winter comes, the hairless dogs are going to scream out, mucho frio, freeze to death, and die. They can't reproduce, but the furry dogs can reproduce. So what happens? They're mostly going to make mostly furry dogs. But the genotype, the trait for the hairless dog might be hanging in there until the next winter comes. He freezes to death. It's adios amigo for him. And after a while, all you see in Alaska will be what? Furry dogs. This is natural selection. Does it occur? Yes. Is natural selection evidence that dogs have bacteria ancestors? I say absolutely not. Natural selection does this. It selects existing traits. If you go for a car, you select the car. You don't create a car. Natural selection has to explain the origin of hearts, lungs, brains, kidneys, etc. Not just hairy dogs coming from hairy dogs. Do things change? Yes, within limits. Variation occurs, but bees make bees, trees make trees, fleas make fleas. So some questions for you while I wrap this up. Origin of matter and energy, origin of life, origin of proteins, origin of DNA, origin of RNA. Do humans have bacteria ancestors? Does fossil evidence and does living evidence? And can mutations make everything we see today? All right, thank you.
Okay, a show of hands. Three-way show. How many of you are creationists? How many evolutionists? How many agnostics? So first, how many of you are creationists? I see I'm in trouble. Any evolutionists in the house to help me? Remember, undecided as well. Okay, I have to, I was told by Mr. Morgan that this is his 501st presentation of the case for creationism. I have never debated a creationist before. I feel what is it, Daniel in the Lion's Den. So I don't have a package set of answers, but let me try to say a little bit about the history of science and then relate it to some of the books that we've seen. Let's start with the motion of the planets. I think all of us agree that the Earth revolves around the sun. We also agree that it's not that long ago that the Catholic Church subjected Galileo to the Inquisition because he argued that the Earth moves. And it's only in the last 15 years, I believe, that the current Pope pulled a panel together to say, actually, Galileo wasn't such a bad guy after all. So I think that we have to understand that science is not meant to say we have explained everything. It says there are many observations, and if we take any one at a time, like, oh, well, let me just look at the history of my family, and I don't see any monkeys there. Okay, so people breed people, fine. But if I go back to the fossil record, we look at another branch of science, which gives us carbon dating, and we have a theory how to be pretty accurate about dating the fossil record, and we go back 100,000 years. Yeah, we still see skeletal evidence of people. Go back 200,000 years? No. There are some Australopithecines or Homo erectus or ape creatures that are somewhat like apes, somewhat like humans, but not humans. So, go back further. A couple of million years, you begin to lose the hominids, and you see other creatures. And so, as we go back in time, we have to go through a very indirect web of science to say, I believe this is the way that we can accurately tell what happened. I believe this is the way in which geological strata formed. Things of this kind. And as we do this, we come up with a very different view of the world. Around 1800, most Christians would tell you that the world was created in about 4000 BC. Because if you went back through the Bible and counted the generations, back through Methuselah all the way to Adam, you would find that it took about 5,000–6,000 years to add the generations together. Now, we have Bill Morgan, creationists, happily talking about billions and billions of years, and assuring us that in billions and billions of years, there's been no evolution of new species. Dogs create dogs, monkeys create monkeys, people create people. The fact is that it's easy to look at any small amount of data and tell a story that fits that limited set of facts. But if you start saying, look at the geological record, look at how we find different strata going on, that's not what happened in 4,000 years. That happened in billions of years, and now most Christians will accept them and won't accept the idea of the Earth being created 4,000 years. You look at the fossil record and you say, well, if I don't just look at the bones by themselves, but I accept what I can learn from physics about the way carbon is incorporated into living creatures, and then what happens when their remains are buried and they're no longer exposed to the air and the decay of radioactive carbon, I can get approximate data. And then there are other methods. And these different methods would seem quite independent. end up with reasonably consistent results. So we have a pretty good idea that we can in fact go back through the layers of time and see different species at different times. Now, of course, the trouble is that how many people are there on the world today? 6 billion. Okay, so if you look at the fossil record of the species that we evolutionists think led up to humans through the Australopithecines, Homo erectus, and so on, the number of good skeletons is of the order of less than 100. Imagine that your job was to tell a story consistently about human life today, looking at the skeletons of 100 of those 6 billion people. So you can either look at that and say, okay, well, if you only have 100 skeletons, that shows that the skeletons were just put there by God on a whim to provide an intellectual puzzle. But you really say, no, the process of time is such that things decay, the record is spotty, and our job is to put together all these things, the carbon evidence, the geological evidence, these bones with approximate dates on them, and try to say, what are the most plausible hypotheses to explain that stuff? Or you can take what I think I gather from Mr. Morgan would be the creationist point of view and say, look, okay, so no, it's not like there are only a few hundred of those skeletons, so I'm happy with the following idea, that the Bible is metaphorical. Okay, we have to accept the Bible as metaphorical because if the Bible were literally true, then the world really only is 6,000 years old since Genesis. So if we accept the story of billions of years, we have already conceded that the Bible is metaphorical. It's not about what happened from the creation onward. So therefore, we have to go back and look at the Bible in terms of how do we read it. And depending on your background, you can either say, I read it as someone from another religious tradition. It's a fascinating historical record of the Hebrew people and of a sect founded by, depending on how you think that either Jesus or Paul, and what do you get from that? Or you can be a full-on Christian believer, but accepting, as you try to reconcile scientific data with your belief, that the Bible is metaphorical. And then you have to accept the following thing. Look, the Bible was written over the course of the last, much of it was written about 2,000 years ago, and then maybe 2,000 years before that, when it was written down. Again, what was that writing? Was that people who really were in contact with God and writing down what they believed he had told them? Or were these people just writing from their faith, trying to tell a story that they thought was consistent with their faith? Let's take the strongest position. Let's agree, for the purpose of argument, that the Bible is the Word of God transmitted through the minds of men, I think. Are there any Bible books written by a woman? So, transmitted, regrettably, through the minds of men. Now, consider that you are talking. Now, what were the Hebrews like 4,000 years ago? They were very fine people, given to a bit of war with their neighbors. What did they know about modern mathematics? Could you explain to them Newton's theory of planetary motion? Or would you have to tell a parable? Could you explain to them DNA so that you could show them how evolution worked? Or could you talk simply in terms of creation and begats? The fact of the matter is that even if you believe the Bible is the Word of God, it is the Word of God as written down by our ignorant ancestors. So as we look at the process of scientific change, we have to accept that we are titrating the Bible as a set of useful stories, which may help us in terms of some of the conduct of our lives, against what we have accumulated through science. And what is very interesting about the conclusion of Mr. Morgan's talk is that he was quite resolute I mean, it's a very good debating strategy, right? He basically concedes everything except the final answer. He says, oh yes, there's DNA. Oh yes, there's billions of years. Oh yes, there's natural selection. But hey, guys, I mean, this is sort of this appeal to, I think, well, you said big burritos, so I will say a cheap type of evidence. Do you have any ancestors who were monkeys? Oh no, you don't. Okay, so people beget people. Did you see a dog that turned into a cat? No. So, cats beget cats. But the fact of the matter is that when we try to look in more detail at the information, we find that there are many fine details that are very hard to approach unless we accept that evolution is a good framework. Right. I'm going to go round in circles because this is a very hard idea to get across. But let me try something else. All right. I talked a bit about planetary motion. Ptolemy had the idea of you're convinced the Earth is fixed. You observe the motions of the planets. You find you can come up with mathematical descriptions of those which allow you to predict where the planets will be in the future. But as you gather more data, you find it gets too complicated. And then the breakthrough was when Kepler and Copernicus taught us to think of the sun as the center and the orbits as ellipses. And then even better than that, Newton came along and said, well, I'm not just going to use a description, I'm going to give you a mathematical formula, the inverse square law of gravitation, that can explain that. And then once we had that theory, amazing things could happen. So astronomers could look at the orbit of one planet and say, it doesn't fit the formula. And instead of just giving up, they did their mathematics. Remember, this was long before computers. Everything was done with quill and paper, not even pencils. And they came up with the inference that there must be another planet at a particular place in the sky to call it the perturbation of the orbit from a mathematical creation. They looked there, and they found Neptune. So Newton's mathematics is incredibly powerful, but that wasn't the end of it. Because with new scientific power came the ability to build new instruments, new data, and now we find we can get information about the very small, and we find we need quantum mechanics. It doesn't say Newton was wrong, it says that at the scale he was working, he was right, but there are more subtle phenomena, and science can reveal those. And I imagine now you can come back and say, well, quantum mechanics was there all along. But it's only this process of science coming up with theories, pushing them as far as they can, making mistakes, and then building a better theory that preserves the discoveries of the old theory and going beyond that yields scientific success. We have relativity, Einstein's relativity. And that allows us to understand phenomena that couldn't have been understood before. And now people are doing careful experiments to try and prove that they're wrong. So now let's come back to evolution. You must understand from what I've just said, Ptolemy, Newton, Einstein, and so on, that the way a scientist works is not to say, well, that's not quite true. The way an individual scientist works is by passionate belief. He has a hypothesis, it is in accord with what he knows so far, and he carries out new experiments, new predictions, to test his hypothesis. Passionately believing his hypothesis is right, and he wants to prove it's right. But he knows that in the fullness of time, it will probably be seen that it's only right in a certain domain of application, and he refines his theory. So when we talk about evolution, let's be very careful. It's not that, I mean, there's a very silly bumper ornament, right, where you take the fish, the ethos, and you replace it by that's some little legs to the fish and Darwin in the middle, and then you feel you're very smart. But Darwin might have been amused temporarily by that, but then he would have been offended. Because as a scientist, his whole point is that he was not writing the book that would be true for all time. He was writing a book that will explain certain things and open up new areas of scientific debate and change. So you all know, I think, the example of the finches on the Galapagos Islands. A variety of those finches with very different characteristics. Now, the story he gave was how that could have changed over time so that the creatures with slightly different lifestyles on these different things revealed it. And this was part of the evidence he used to build his theory of evolution. Now, Mr. Morgan would respond. He said, yeah, but still finches begat finches, and therefore this is evidence for natural selection, but not for the great changes in evolution. So we step back and we discover new things since the time of Darwin. We discover, for example, that the fossil record supports the idea that what was multiple bones for a jaw in one species seems to fit the timeline for another species. Some of those bones fuse and become the bones of the inner ear. That we get the reuse of a structure for a totally different purpose. The sort of thing that does count as real evolution, not A begets A, B begets B. So we get more evidence as we look more carefully at the fossil record. It makes sense of it. But the really crucial breakthroughs were A, genetics. Mendel's discovery that there is a particular nature to inheritance. Again, if you look at all the way humans talked until the time of about 1900, it was always in terms of blood. Right? That you got good blood or you got bad blood. And that blood that you got from your parents was mixed. But now we see a slide here, which is quite happy to say something that was not known until about 1900, that in fact the nature of inheritance is particular. You can have back breeding as well as forward breeding. But we add mutations to that, we can get change. Then we go much further. 1953, Watson and Crick, Crick just died. In fact, on Tuesday of next week, there'll be a celebration of his life at the Salk Institute in La Jolla. Crick and Watson showed us the structure of DNA, and now what people can do is they can look at different species and discover that long strands of DNA are the same. So how many minutes do I have? Let me close. I'll come back to this in the later discussion. But let me close by just telling you an interesting piece of information. In the 19th century, there was a fashion for natural theology. The idea was, how could we understand the nature of God? And the answer was, we would understand God by understanding his creation. In other words, we would look at the world around us and try to infer what God was like, because he had created this world. And a book I loved very much was written by an anatomist named Charles Bell, published in 1820, in a series of books on natural theology. It was called The Hand. And what he observed was that if you looked at a horse, the structure of the bones within the hoof matched this 5-bone structure of the hand. If you looked at the fin of a whale, it matched the 5-bone structure of the hand. And he read that as evidence of the parsimony of God. That basically, as he designed all these creatures all at once, he would make little changes in the blueprint. So say, okay, 5 bones is good for hands. That's the one I'm designing the whale. I'll use the hand design, but I'll put it inside a fin instead. Now, what is fascinating is this was about 40 years before Darwin published. And when I read the book, many years after Darwin, I read it in terms of, oh, that makes so much sense from evolution terms. We had the evolution of mammals. We got to the stage where we had the 5-bone structure of the foot. Then in creatures that developed hands, we preserved that, but we got dexterity added. In the case of the whales, we didn't need that anymore, but the bone structure remained, even though we were just using the fins as unitary pillars. So in the same way, you can certainly look today at the DNA structure, and you can take that as evidence of God's design. You can say, okay, God doesn't design the superficial appearance. God designs the DNA. he is the ultimate programmer in DNA. And so if there are resemblances, that's not evidence for evolution. It's not that we've got these structures mutating, so we have similar structures. I think we've got 27 seconds. We've got these similar structures. But instead, no. God, as a parsimonious programmer, just said, okay, I've designed this creature. Now I like to design a monkey, and I want him to be a bit like humans, but not as beautiful. So I'm going to change the DNA here. I want to make gorillas. Okay, so I'll take the DNA and change 1% there. That may be the alternative. But I don't try. I'm going to go over time to just ask one question. Here's an interesting result, about 2 years old. Somebody took the gene for the eye of a fly and put it in the body of a mouse. What do you think grew on the body of the mouse? I'll tell you.
Thank you. I've heard a lot of talk about God and the Bible, but I understand this is a science debate. We can talk about theology during question and answer, but I appreciate a good Bible study. As to the age of the earth, I never said how old I think it is. I think it's thousands. I'm sure you believe billions. I'll give trillions of years. Trillions of years. But there's a lot of answers to be made that are true. And, okay, great. And, quick look. Now, as to the checklist, I didn't hear any of these answered. Origin of matter, origin of energy, stars, life, mutation, meiosis. Didn't hear answers to that, but I did hear some evidence that he gave, some detailed evidence. He talked about Australopithecine. Everybody has seen this before, right? I remember the first time I saw that, I was really surprised by that. And that's teaching that humans have ape-like ancestors. If someone teaches you you have ape-like ancestors, what's a valid question to ask? How do you know that? When I was 14 years old, I was taught it. I believed the teacher to be an authority, so I believed it. But this is important. What is that? It's a projection of what? Drawings. Cartoon drawings. I never thought when I was 14 years old to ask what is the actual fossil evidence. When I was 26 years old, I got a little pamphlet that talked about what the actual fossil evidence was. It was very sketchy, fragmentary. The more I looked into it, I looked in other fields as well and came to the conclusion that creation is the best explanation. Now, how many people here have ever heard of Lucy? Show of hands. Okay, how many of you love Lucy? He talked about Australopithecine, very important. Lucy is the grand poobah of fossil evidence. Here's some evidence on Lucy. Lucy was found in Africa, about 42 inches tall. Skull, jaw, teeth, arms, fingers, toes were all ape-like. But the special thing was it could walk bipedal. Walk bipedal and be upright. There's a chimp called a bonobo, pygmy chimpanzee. Same height, same weight, same jaw, same teeth, same fingers, same toes. And what can it do? Walk upright. Got some pictures for you. Look at this. Look, Ma, no hands. Apes today, the bonobo can walk upright. And if you think only kids can do it, there's its mom. If this animal were fossilized and dug up, people would say, hey, look at the knee, look at the hip. This is an ape that can walk upright. They would say, this is an animal that is our ancestor. So, he talked about fossils. Great. Didn't hear any detailed fossils. He just said the fossil record. Well, the Cambrian explosion is a nightmare for the evolutionists. In the Cambrian layer, ancient rocks, all phyla, show up, including Chordata, which are vertebrates. Fish show up. Billions of animals show up. Not transitional form among it. The Cambrian explosion, evolutionists admit, is a big problem for them. Okay, so evolutionists might say fossilization is rare. There are still trillions upon trillions of fossils in the fossil record. Here's my favorite fossil in the Cambrian layer, the trilobite. What does an evolutionist do when he finds an ancient fossil's eye that is as complex as any today? He says it's remarkably evolved. The trilobite eye had 15,000 lenses. There it is. No transitional forms. All of a sudden, bam! In the fossil record, you've got an eye as complex as anything living today. He brought up homology. That's the belief. Hey, look at it. Humans have 5 digits. A cat's got 5 digits. A whale has 5 digits in a bat. Thinking that this is evidence for the theory of evolution. But there's a few problems. First, biologists do know that the genes are not similar that the species. I think it's kind of sophomoric to say, hey, we got 5 fingers, so does a whale, therefore we're related. Their embryos form the limbs completely differently. Obvious there's differences. I mean, people, do you see a little bit of difference between these limbs? And my question is, well, spiders have 8 legs, octopi have 8 legs, are they related to each other? Okay, so that's something to consider. DNA similarities he brought up. This is a common one. 30 seconds, I'm going to take an extra 20 seconds. Okay? People will say, hey, we're more similar to an ape's DNA than anything else. Okay? Well, first, all of these animals have cells. These animals reproduce by meiosis. Vertebrates, these animals are vertebrates. These animals have 4 limbs. These animals can fertilize young. Who are you most common with? Apes. You would expect the genetic material between a human and an ape would be most similar because we have the most in common with them. But there's only one organism that can do this. Heart surgery and drive-by shootings. We stand alone when it comes to that. Big difference, we have 46 chromosomes, the ape has 48, a tremendous difference that is just shushed aside by evolution writings. And in conclusion, this guy has some work. Please stop trying so hard to make me relate to you. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So what's the answer to my question? If you put a gene for a fly eye and a mouse, what do you get? Right? You get a mouse. So why did God decide to make DNA that specified a fly eye, but it turned out to yield a mouse eye? Look, now, each of those slides would take me probably 10 minutes to discuss carefully. But let's get one thing very straight. Yes, it's amusing to say that a monkey does not wish to be related to me, or a chimpanzee does not wish, but they're not. They're not my ancestors. We're talking about a theory of evolution. We're saying we have, for example, here's something called, when you have here's one technique. And I think this is going to use up all my time, so let me just do this. One technique for relating species is you compare the DNA. Now, the notion is, remember, there's mutation and there's natural selection. But if you look at the DNA in a creature, a lot of it mutated into rubbish long ago. So basically, when something mutates, it can either be lethal, you've changed something that's absolutely vital to the organism. The DNA no longer programs anything useful for the organism, but it doesn't matter because there are redundant genes that can continue to destroy a decent organism. Or in very rare cases, the change actually is beneficial in a particular environment, and then you begin to get differential reproduction in that environment. So when we compare the DNA of 2 species, we can on the one hand try to say, what are the functional changes? What is it about the difference between the DNA of the 2 species that makes them different? Why do they live better in this environment or that environment? How is it we have language, they don't? Why are they third? And things of this kind. But there's also all this junk DNA. Now the nice thing for the biologist about junk DNA is when it mutates, there's no selection, right? It's just you're randomly changing some letters in the junk. So therefore you can look at the junk DNA, which is common to 2 species, and then see how many changes there are between them. And so that tree, which was presented to you as a fiction, can begin to be filled in because you can actually look at what is you can estimate what is the rate of mutation, and then you can say, looking at the number of changes in the junk DNA, how long ago did this occur? So our best bet now from using this molecular clock is that if you go back about 5 million years, you get our shared ancestor with the bonobo you met a little while ago, and the chimpanzee and the gorilla and the orangutan. But you have to go about 20 million years back to find our common ancestor with the monkey. So that there is a pile of extra data there that again says, look, if you imagine that God is a sloppy creator, or just has a sense of humor to fool us, then he's going to write these very weird programs where most of the instructions in the DNA are junk. And only some of them make sense. And then the fact that we can do a timeline is somehow just an irrelevant fact. But if we really accept the general theory of evolution, and I come back to that in a moment, the general theory of evolution, then you can begin to make sense about the temporal relationship between species and begin to estimate when there was a common ancestor. And then, of course, you've got the very hard task of figuring out what the common ancestor is. Let me just close by emphasizing that a lot of the problems that Mr. Morgan has, I think, are because he has a false view of science, in the sense that if science claimed to have all the answers, then to show places where we don't have the answers could be seen as a blow against evolution. What we're simply saying is, as a general method of saying we've got the neo-Darwinian view is we've got a genetic structure, there can be mutations, we bring in the information from the two parents, etc., and then we get selection on the phenotypic results. That's a general method. We've seen it's changed. Darwin didn't know about genes. Mendel didn't know about DNA. None of them knew about radioactive dating. They didn't know about the molecular clock and junk DNA. Each of these adds new evidence that doesn't say I can explain a particular event. It says I can explain many events, and that gives me faith. Yes, faith is reasonable to now go and explain more events.
Okay, he said I had a false view of science. All I'm looking for is some observational, empirical evidence. That's all. That's not too much to ask for, and I don't see it. If the theory of evolution happened, there should be evidence for it. There should be a lot of it. Living, fossil, where's the evidence for this? Okay, I brought up something interesting. I didn't think I was going to use this overhead. The mitochondrial clock. There's some interesting things about this. People look at mitochondrial DNA, estimate the rate of mutation, and try to date how old our ancestors are. It was very common for a while that they called mitochondrial Eve to be around 100 to 200,000 years ago. But mitochondrial DNA can have a faster mutation rate. And this is all evidence or articles from evolutionists. Eve is being calculated at a mere 6,000 years ago. This is not a quote from a creationist. This is from Science magazine. You can write it down. January 2nd, 1998. Ann Gibbons' article calibrates the clock. Look what she says. She says mitochondrial DNA appears to mutate much faster than expected, prompting new DNA forensic procedures and raising what? Troubling questions about the dates of evolutionary events. Nothing should be troubling in science if you are seeking truth. If you're trying to defend your hypothesis, things can be very troubling. Okay. Now, this is in the Campbell textbook. People say, oh, the horse evolved. Well, learn the details before you believe stuff. I mean, the stories are great. Learn the details. These are the 5 different horses in the Campbell biology book. Learn the details. These critters were all over the place. They had different numbers of front toes on their front hooves, on their back hooves, on their ribs, on their teeth. This stuff isn't presented in the class to show a nice little sequence of horses. That's been disproven quite a while ago. How many of you have ever heard of Archaeopteryx? Archaeopteryx is a pillar for evidence for the theory of evolution. They say, hey, it had teeth, claws, and a bony tail. Well, these are characteristics of all kinds of different birds. Hesperonychus has teeth. Claws are on ostriches, Paracos hoatzes. And bony tails, they are rare, but they are similar to the modern sloths as quoted by an evolutionist. Now, Alan Fiducia is a big-time bird expert. He says paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into a bird found other dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird, a perching bird, and no amount of paleo battle is going to change that. The thing is decide for yourself, seek out evidence, and hold on to what's good. How many of you have heard of vestigial organs before? Supposed evolutionary leftovers from our past. Okay? About 100 years ago, this guy with a long German name said there are about 86 vestigial organs in the human body. He said tonsils, appendix, the thymus, the coccyx, pineal glands, etc. Many, many things. Supposed evidence for the theory of evolution left over from our ancient past, but no longer used. Today, the list of vestigial organs is down to 0. With increasing knowledge, people are learning that these are not leftovers from our past. Okay. How many of you have, this was from Campbell's book, that fish in caves lose their eyes. That's not evolution, that's loss of function. The creationists asked for mutations that increase in information. To go from bacteria to blue whale, the mutations would have to add things, a central nervous system, a circulatory system, vision, etc. Mutations lose information. When you scramble DNA, you cannot do as many functional things as you could before. Mutation is not the friend of theory of evolution, it's the enemy. Okay, now, your car, believe it or not, needs 10,000 parts for it to work. If one part out of 10,000 doesn't work, you don't have a functional car. Your human body has 11 systems that you need. Skeletal, muscular, immune, digestive, circulatory, reproductive, a lot more. How many of those body systems have to be functioning for you to live? It's not 11, 10. You can live without reproductive. But, a fair question, what evolved first? You just look at the heart. It needs a muscular system, a skeletal system, a nervous system, an immune system, an endocrine system. All of these systems work together. It's like the car. We see a car pull out of Detroit. Well, it took a lot of time and effort to put all those little subsystems to make the big system together. Your systems are much more complex than your cars. How did a bit by bit trans process evolve such a system that is so interworking? Question for him. Thank you.
I want to recall 2 quotes from what we just heard. One was, nothing should be troubling in science if you are seeking the truth. So I've worked for years, I've developed a theory. New data come along, and I'm not sure whether it destroys the theory or whether the experiments weren't well done. I took a long time to gather those data, but they contradict my theory. I shouldn't be troubled because I'm seeking the truth. I will be troubled because I can't rest until I've A, got new data to confirm that those observations were correct, and if I've got enough data to be sure those observations are correct, then I've either find they are consistent with the theory and I can preserve it, or I have to go back and figure out how to. And this is very hard, and this is what's so different from the creationist method. I have to go back and not only check that I can adjust the theory to explain the new data, I have to make sure that those changes preserve explanations for everything I had explained before. Nothing should be troubling in science if you are seeking the truth. It's because we're seeking the truth that we are troubled, because we burn and live in our world. That's why we work so hard. It's not an easy job being a scientist. We are constantly troubled because we are responsible for weaving so many diverse data into a consistent web of theory. The other quote was, and this I love, seek out evidence and hold on to what is good. Now that's called fraud. Plain and simple. Seek out evidence and hold on to what's good. Keep what fits your theory, throw anything else away. But look, The thing about science is that we try to explain it. Thanks to carbon dating, thanks to genetics, thanks to DNA, thanks to neurophysiology, we can explain many things about how the brain works. We can look at disease processes. We can come up with rational therapies. What does creationism say? It says everything is designed. God designed the horse. No ancestors that weren't horses. God designed the monkey. No ancestors that were monkeys. God designed the rat. God designed the thing. God designed man. God designed woman. What do we learn from that? Absolutely nothing. Let's go back to our planetary motion again. We say, God set the earth at the center of the firmament. And I don't know, I think in one of the web pages that Mr. Morgan's website points out to, we're told that we should not seek explanations for how the moon came to orbit the earth. It's much easier to explain by saying that God chose to place the moon in orbit about the earth. Nothing is explained. So in other words, creationism is not science. If it comforts you to be a creationist, if you find it easier to be ignorant of science, if you find the need for complete certainty, be a creationist. Because you have an answer for everything, no matter how strange it is. If you agree with them, you hold on to them, they are good. God created it. You don't like the data, you say that proves how foolish evolutionists are. Reject it. You don't have to come up with a scheme that actually explains it.
With all due respect, because I'm rejecting the data, I haven't seen any data. Where you mentioned Australopithecine and geological counts, but where is the data? Is it too much to ask for evidence? Show me. What is the evidence? Why not have it? It is supported by the first law of thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics, the law of biogenesis, the cell theory. This is in all your handouts if you want to read up on it. I believe all the fields of science better support the creation position. Paleontology, the fossils. Trillions of fossils exist. There should be all kinds of evidence of an evolutionary process. We didn't hear any tonight, and if you look for what the actual fossils are, you won't see it. Another great argument for creation, in my opinion, are these guys. Crystal-fly curlew. They migrate from Alaska to Australia, 5,000 miles over the water nonstop. And their parents leave them there. You've seen the movie Home Alone, right? This is really Home Alone. Instinct, I think, is a tremendous argument for creation. Instinct is information that's imputed in the organism. These guys were not trained how to navigate, when to fly, how to fly. Instinct, programming requires a program. Okay. Now, evolutionists often say this. Well, evolution starts, and I thought you would say this, when I bring up the origin of life, origin of matter, they often say evolution starts right after life originated. Well, if I were an evolutionist, I would avoid those questions too. I wouldn't begin to address them. Creation addresses all the questions, from the origin of the matter, energy, life. Evolutionists try to avoid that, but I'm simply asking for the best explanation. To me, saying evolution starts after the origin of life is like the Dodgers saying, hey, we'll play you guys, but we want to start in the 9th inning. Then we can bring in Gagne and close the game up for us. Can't do it. Let's address all the questions in science. There's nothing, well, I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. Okay, cool. Sorry for that. Okay. Now, here's an interesting topic. What killed the dinosaurs? Do we know what killed every single dinosaur? No, but we know what killed the dinosaurs that have been found dead. Cigarette smoking. Oh, wait, my kid put that in there as far as I care. Do we know what killed every dinosaur? No. But the dinosaurs that have been found, the observational evidence is obvious. If you find a crushed, buried dinosaur underneath sedimentary rock, which is rock deposited by water, what do you think killed it? A violent flood. It got buried. These things didn't die from a meteor and they get buried underneath 5 feet of sedimentary rock. The evidence supports that dinosaurs were killed by a violent flood. All right? So that's what the evidence leads us to. Now, sometimes people do talk about design. Design's an important thing. Can you prove design? Well, let's start with the definition of what design is. This is from the dictionary. The definition of a design is a thing planned for or an outcome aimed at. Suppose you were walking home one day, you came into your driveway and you saw a bunch of rocks. How did those rocks get there? Did somebody put them there on purpose, or is that the result of chance? Well, with an arrangement like this, you would probably say most likely chance. You could never prove it, but you're making your best guess. You would say, oh, it's probably got there by chance. Suppose you came home a different time and you saw 6 rocks in a perfectly straight line. You'd probably say it's most likely that this is the result of a plan and a purpose and a design. But still, can you prove it? No, you could never absolutely prove it. Suppose you came home a different day and you found 100 rocks in a perfect circle. You said to your significant other, oh, look what the wind did by chance. You said, no, that's too complex. That's a result of a plan, a purpose, and a design. Could you prove it? No, not likely, but there are degrees of faith. So then we look at anatomy. We look at the vascular system in a human being. Can we prove that's a design? No. But to me, it's obvious, the evidence is overwhelming that something that this complex is the result of design. Maybe it's a result of chance. I personally don't have that much faith. Let's see what he says. Oh, yes, it is a design. All right. Now, just a little bit about me. I'm not going to preach, but I was an atheist, but I was open-minded enough to look at the evidence. I love to hear alternate views and see what they have to say. When I was 26, I got a little bit of fossil evidence on human ancestors, learning that it was bits and pieces of bone that made up those cartoon drawings that convinced me that I had an ape-like ancestor. I called geology departments, paleontology departments, and tried to say, wait a minute, is this little piece of paper true? Or are they feeding me a bill of goods? The more I looked into it, the more I saw there was fragmentary evidence. And I looked at other fields of science and came to the conclusion that there's a creator. And I'm not ashamed, I'm not going to deny it, but I am a Christian today, but I call myself a bottom up. My mommy and daddy didn't tell me you got to be a Christian and go to Catholic school or anything like that. That didn't happen. I started with the evidence that there is something out there more intelligent and more powerful than us. Science is a great foundation for people to seek. Many people don't want you to seek. I encourage you. I would love for you to learn more details about the theory of evolution. See what those fossils are. See what the biological evidence, and then decide for yourself. Whoops. Well, we don't even know whether or not. People get excited about life happening by chance. Let me talk about one protein in your body. The average protein in your body is 400 amino acids long. And you have 20 amino acids in your body. So let's think about words for a second. Imagine there's an alphabet with only 20 words, or 20 letters. And by chance you have to spell a 400-letter long word correctly. The odds are 10 to the 520th power. Astronomical odds that that could happen by chance. The average protein in your body, once again, is 400 amino acids long. The odds are 10 to the 520th power that the arrangement happened by chance. You would win California's Super Lotto 70 weeks in a row before those odds would be reached. But let's suppose, just by chance, you got all the proteins you needed. Just by chance, you got the DNA, the RNA. They all had a party and jumped inside the cell membrane, wiggled and jiggled, and became living. Suppose I gave you the first living cell by chance, which is statistically completely impossible. The first living cell does not just have to be alive, it has to be able to do what? Reproduce. Incredibly complex chemistry, because they have alive, I'm alive. There's no, I can't do my binary fission, I'm dead. End of the theory of evolution. Besides reproducing, that first life also has to be able to metabolize incredibly complex chemistry. So first off, you're not going to get one protein happening by chance, much less life, and the life has got to be able to metabolize, reproduce, and then go through all these wonderful mutations to make all the life we see today. You can believe that if you want, but my question in concluding, is your belief based upon observational science evidence, or do you like the hypothesis of it? I will share a little bit more. When I was 14 and they showed the 8 men drawings, I loved it. I said, this is great. That's a pie in the face of the Bible and all those rules about sex before marriage. I said, hallelujah, brother, this is just my story, not saying it's anybody else's. I chose to believe that. I've talked to hundreds of evolutionists since then. Okay, one last sentence. I've talked to hundreds of evolutionists. I'm always interested in what their evidence is on why they are what they are. Still looking. Haven't seen any good empirical evidence. I believe it's the hypothesis that's driving them, not the observation. Thank you.
It would be nice if we each shared one of God's stated properties, which was omniscience. If we knew everything. If we look at scientists today, we find people who are specialized. If you're a biologist, you may just look at the heart. If you look at the heart, you may be involved with understanding the process of oxygenation. Another specialist may be concerned with the way it acts as a compensator. Others may not even look at the heart itself. They may look at the conduction of nerve impulses that synchronize it to make it beat. Others may be looking at some of the chemicals that can affect those processes. So that our work as scientists is that we look in a variety of places. We try to find tractable subproblems, and then we make progress with them. In the format today, I can't go through all of modern biology and give you the 6,795 case studies of local problems where evolution makes sense. But yes, I'm happy to confess that there is no living human who has a theory that goes all the way from the origin of the universe to the evolution of the human. But there are specialized fields in which we can answer many of the questions that were presented to us as unanswered. The origin of matter and energy. Well, perhaps you are comfortable with the idea of saying, well, if you tell me that there was a designer who created a world with matter and energy as it is today, then fine, that's your choice. But as you know, modern physics does have a theory of what was graciously called the big burrito. And I apologize to the Mexicans in the audience for being used so sarcastically. And what they've shown is that a very simple set of equations can be followed to show how, starting from a very simple initial condition, you can create, through just the dynamics of these equations, an expanding universe. And what is more, within that universe, you can explain so many things today. Why is it that we can look at stars where, based on Einstein's theory of relativity, we know that billions of, what we're seeing is the light from them billions of years ago, and we can understand those properties in terms of this physics model. We can send satellites up and measure the temperature of the background radiation, and it's consistent with the theory of the Big Bang. So we can then go on from there to look at the way in which elements form, stars form. Cosmology is a well-sophisticated thing. We know that by looking at many different stars, we can come up with the sequence where we can have a pretty good understanding of how stars go through different stages of luminosity and finally become brown dwarfs or black holes or what have you. Origin of life. We don't claim to know the answer to that. I've gone to scientific meetings where we've had alternate theories. This is a huge question. And there are many competing theories, and frankly, nobody is satisfied. But we have been able to show that if you take some very simple molecules and you expose them to certain types of electrical fields corresponding to what a lightning storm might give you, you can form more complex molecules. So it's not that we can prove that's how you get the creation of cellular life, but we can at least see how some of the processes work. So we're like looking at a big puzzle, and different specialists can look at different pieces and say, hey, here are some of the pieces that we can wire up using modern physics. Here are the places where really evolution does give us local information. Isn't that great? Now, let's just think seriously about the nature of design. What we haven't heard is really a story about how the designer did his design. Let's take the example of the motor car. Today's motor car is the fruit of 100 years, more than 100 years of technological development based on starting with the horseless carriage, saying, okay, I put a motor in instead of a horse, so I have the first car looks pretty much like a carriage. And then we slowly invent so many things. We start going faster. The rain splatters so much at the speed it's dangerous. Somebody invents the windscreen. There's trouble just trying to use direct steering of the front wheels. Somebody comes up with the differential transmission. Somebody then, much later, figures out how to make automatic gear shifts. Today we have on the order of 30 electronic computers in the car. So if you look at that wonderful diagram of the modern human, you've got to ask yourself, if you're a creationist, what's your idea of design? Did God, unlike our designers, us, our automotive engineers, who had to go through trial and error, building more and more complicated cars, developing new technology, bringing it in, did God, the designer, see it all at once and immediately say, this is the vascular system of a human. This is the brain of a human. This is how the hippocampus of a human will differ from the hippocampus of a horse. This is how the medulla oblongata of a frog will differ from the So it's interesting that if you really start thinking about design, not in terms of just taking it as an all or no answer, hey, I don't have to worry about that. There's a gap in the data. Doesn't matter. God, the designer, didn't make those creatures. God just chose to make this creature, this creature, this creature, didn't make these other things. He didn't have to worry about getting from dinosaurs to birds. Forget it, he designed the dinosaurs, and then for some reason saw it fit to allow a flood to wipe them out. Why he designed them so they could be wiped out, I don't know. But he did. Let me conclude with an interesting observation you might not know about, and that is there is now in computer science a field called genetic algorithms. And the idea here is that you may have a problem that you, as the computer programmer, don't know how to solve. But what you can do is recognize that one solution is better than another. So what you do is you actually apply evolution as a computational algorithm, where basically what you have is, let's say you're trying to wire up a chip, VLSI, computer chip. And today you've got up to 1 million components on the chip. How on earth do you figure out the best way to lay out the components so that you can wire them up with the shortest amount of wiring and have the whole thing work? Well, the answer is you don't. You use genetic algorithms. You set up a design that's pretty good. And then you just have your computer start randomly changing the designs and then evaluating. In this case, it might be a better chip is one with more components and less wiring. That meets certain criteria. And now you just do that. You make, in your computer, you make tens of thousands of copies, pick the ones that are best, keep those, then make tens of thousands of copies of those, always adding those mutations, changing them. And within a feasible amount of computation time, you have got that perfect circle of stuff, not by the evolutionary algorithm, not by somebody putting it down. In other words, there's a convergent evidence, if you like, for evolution from the computational side, we can see that what might appear to be explicit design can in fact be achieved by evolutionary algorithms which mimic the process of evolution. So here we have the following. Creationism is not serious. It's a gathering of pieces of data and then simply smiling upon them and saying, these are evidence of a designer in this. Science cannot, there's no such thing as a scientist who is omniscient. We are each local specialists. We pick our sub-area, we work hard in that area, and we find that time and again there are specific problems in which the evolutionary method works. And just like my story of Ptolemy and Newton and Einstein, we change the theory. There are big controversies in evolution between people like Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Dawkins. And creationists have often taken sentences out of context in which these people are debating each other, and instead of saying, look, there was an honest debate in the scientific community about how to best change the theory of evolution, not changing the underlying Darwinian principles, but filling in the details to explain new data, taking those out of context, saying, see, even the so-called evolutionists don't believe in evolution.
Now's the time of questions and answers. What I like is if both gentlemen can be at their podiums. We'll take a question first for Mr. Morgan. We'll give him 1 to 2 minutes to answer it, and we'll also let the professor respond also, and then we'll take a question from the professor. So anyone with a question for Mr. Morgan? You're kidding. Sir, right here.
Yeah, how would you explain the fossils of Homo erectus and Neanderthals that existed found alongside?
Okay, when I was in,
Can you repeat the question?
okay, great.
Yeah.
He asked about the fossils for Neanderthal and Homo erectus. When I took biology in the mid-70s, they taught me that that was evidence for the theory of evolution. Homo erectus, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man. Current evolutionists today, the majority of them, and you don't have to believe me, but you can do your own research, believe that Neanderthal man was either human, most of them believe that, or a subspecies and not ancestral. I believe Neanderthal man was human. They tended to be sturdier and stockier than humans today, but there's a variety of morphologies among humans, and the Neanderthal man falls right within that. They buried their dead with flowers. They had musical instruments. I believe they were as human as you and me today. You got a minute to file?
Well, like I say, if you talk to different evolutionists than I do, I was recently at the American Museum of Natural History talking to Dean Tassel, one of the foremost experts in evolution. He was quite comfortable with the idea that not that that the Neanderthals were ancestral to us, they were a branch coming out, and that in the end they were wiped out. What's not clear is whether there was any interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthals. So there may be some direction. But I dispute your claim that evolutionists have given up on the idea of Neanderthal as a separate species.
Okay, a question for the professor? Okay.
Where do you claim that the initial matter that was involved in the Big Bang, where do you say that that all came from?
Well, I don't. I mean, it seems to me, if I've got a choice between saying where did a set of equations come from, or where did a creature, an omniscient being who could design the human vascular system come from, I think the easier hypothesis is to start with the equation. I mean, what is, either way, you've got the problem of where's your first cause. No matter how far you go back, you either say, okay, this is the place I stop, or I go forward. So a believer says, I'll go back till I get to the designer, and that's where I stop. And I don't ask where the designer comes from. I don't say who designed the designer. It's just as good a question. Right? Who could design something that could design us? So you're comfortable with that.
So it's the same kind of faith then? It's the faith in...
Well, the only difference is that in one case, we have a set of very detailed observations on things like the background radiation, the expansion of the universe, the different stars at different distances in time from us, and they're all consistent with just this simple set of equations. If you tell me that the universe was created by God, then I have the right to ask you, well, why is the background radiation 2.5 Kelvin? Why is the universe expanding this way? Why is the distribution of stars this and that? And all you can answer is, I guess this was the choice of the creator, and that's fine. You're welcome to say that. But I think that if you can get it down to a set of equations from which you can deduce all of those things, rather than just simply saying, I have no explanation except that was the chosen design, I feel more comfortable with the equation. But, yeah.
Can I say one more thing? I'm really curious, but like, you support the law of conservation of mass, right? I mean, isn't that the matter can't be created or destroyed? Like, I don't understand how something that's just there.
The Big Bang is a singularity. By that it means that the theory says if you really go back to point zero, you have a point in which all energy and mass are created. So you just have to define that singularity such that the total energy and mass is equivalent to what it is today. I mean, there have been respectable astrophysicists who have claimed that in fact, in the depths of space, new matter can be created. As you know, at the moment, people are trying to make theories of the rate at which the universe has expanded have had to hypothesize a form of dark matter and dark energy that we cannot yet observe. So, the books are still open. It may be that in the end somebody will say, no, there's no dark matter, no dark energy. There's somebody who has decreed a rate of expansion, a creator, and that really is the answer. At the moment, it seems better to try and understand what that other form of matter could be by making inferences from our measurements. But you have to understand that science does not live in certainty, it lives in uncertainty, and we're continually trying to find new facts and then find the most economical explanation. I don't find saying there's a designer economic. I find it profitable, because then you've got to explain how there could be a designer who has all these wonderful blueprints. And if you're happy with that, then I can't argue with you, but it doesn't seem to me a satisfying answer. I'm not completely satisfied with the Big Bang, but it seems to be more economic.
Okay, well, I would respectfully say he skillfully and eloquently did not answer your question. And they won't. They'll talk and wave their hands at somebody who asks a simple question. Do you believe in the law of conservation of mass and energy? And he either said yes or no. Evolutionists avoid that question. The first law of thermodynamics is a big pie in the face for evolution theory. Teaching matter and energy is neither created nor destroyed. You can beg the question all you want and say, well, who made God? No, we're talking about your natural explanation for the origin of matter and energy. Now, isn't it interesting? He said earlier in his closing that on the origin of life, they listen to all kinds of different ideas. Which idea don't they listen to? Supernatural. No, you're not allowed in here. We're the scientists. Well, listen to all different kinds. Listen to all the different theories you want on the origin of matter and energy. There's only one that agrees with the first law of thermodynamics, which I think is the best explanation or best defense for a supernatural creator. You might not believe this, but I have good friends that are atheists. We have polite conversations. It's the best way to learn on the internet. I have a very brilliant friend that's an atheist. I asked him, how did the universe originate? What is your best explanation? He replied to me, God didn't do it. I didn't ask you that. What did I ask you? What is your best explanation? He said, I don't have one. I didn't ask him if he knew. We're not asking him if he knows. No. We're asking, what is your best explanation? But again, if I were asked that in the role of the evolutionist, I wouldn't answer either. I would try to avoid that question myself.
That answer is incredibly misleading. I've told you that scientists do not claim omniscience. If you're an evolutionist, you are totally agnostic about the origin of the universe. You have no position on it. You may, as part of your other studies, be interested in physics and cosmology and may subscribe to the Big Bang or not. That has nothing to do with being an evolutionist. The laws of thermodynamics have nothing to do with the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is completely consistent with the first and second laws of thermodynamics. So you all these red herrings by telling us what evolutionists believe about things which are totally independent of being evolutionists.
Okay. All right, a question then for Morgan.
Let's start the game in the ninth inning, right? We embrace the whole ninth inning ballgame from beginning to end. Evolutionists start after the original life. Go ahead. Thanks.
Question. I have a question for you, Bill. What about carbon dating and how carbon dating shows how old fossils are, that they are, millions or something like that?
Okay. Age is not a physical property. Science cannot tell you how old anything is. To assume the age of anything, you have to make assumptions. Suppose I were to say, what do you guys think is older? This pedestal, the chairs, the floor, the lights, the projector. You would have to make two key assumptions to estimate the age of anything. What did it originally look like? And has it been contaminated or tinkered with? Or what happened to it since it was created? Suppose we tried to estimate the age of this. We'd say, well, we assume it had a nice shiny varnish. It was used 4 times a day. It's about 8 years old. Assumption 1, what would look like originally. Assumption 2, has it been affected since then? Carbon dating is used in this way. Oh, they pick a bone up, and they tell you they measure the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12. Have a challenge. Do any of you have an idea what the approximate ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 is? I've read many biology textbooks. They never tell you the approximate ratios. First off, how many people are familiar with carbon-14, carbon-12 dating? Are any of you familiar with what the approximate ratio is between the two? It's not in the textbooks. Ask yourself why. Why don't they tell you that the ratio between carbon-14 and carbon-12 is 1 part per trillion? You got to do some research to see that, but they don't tell you in your biology textbook. Because a lot of people say, whoa, looks like there's a little room for error in this. Tremendous room of error, measurement for error. And they don't look at the carbon-14, they measure the beta particle emissions, and they estimate that it's uniformly distributed among the carbon-12. So you've got a bad numerator, you get a bad denominator. I don't put any faith in it at all. But even if it were accurate, what was the original content? Has it been contaminated? Evolutionists themselves say, if you pick up a bone with your own hand, you're a bonehead. Why is that? You've contaminated it. Well, that thing's been in the ground and subject to groundwater, infiltration, all kinds of minerals. It's been contaminated since it died.
How do you tell how old a tree is? Oh, how do you know that's accurate?
You have a tree, you tell how old it is, and then you come around and see it.
So in fact, it is possible to tell how old some trees are. So I'll just suggest that blanket dismissal is impossible.
Question for the professor?
Yeah, I have a question about this handout thingy. It says 5 questions to ask an atheist and 5 questions to ask an evolutionist, right?
Yes,
But is this a creationist and evolutionist conversation?
I made the bookmark.
Oh, you made it?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
But the
'cause
question's for him.
The question is for the
You
professor
can ask
right
me a
now.
question.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and we have some time afterwards, maybe.
No, I wasn't. I'm just asking about the pamphlet itself. It doesn't ask 5 questions to ask a creationist.
Now's your chance.
Well,
But just be clear about the pamphlet's not clear. That's all.
all right.
On the fossils, there are trillions of fossils found in these, there are scientists that specify, or that specialize in certain fields in the ecology. They haven't found one fossil, any fossil evidence of any common ancestor that you're talking about.
No.
Is there
What I'm
any
saying is,
that are actually found?
if you imagine you take something that's pretty, there are certain things that fossilize easily and they're preserved pretty well. And there are certain creatures that are very common, and they're a lot more ants than us, right? So if you were to just go and randomly sample the planet, you'd be much more likely to find an ant than a human. The same thing with the fossil record, that if, as most of us believe, that the hominids only go back a few million years, as against 100 or 200 million years for certain other creatures. And if you consider that they were very sparse until recently, it's only very recently the human population has passed.
Not just humans,
No,
any.
but what I'm saying is in terms of the family tree of humans, there aren't that many creatures. So And then because they're fairly big skeletons, the chance that the whole thing fossilizes and is preserved is still fairly small. So the record is quite big. So what we've got is these different creatures sort of scattered through time, dated by this carbon dating, dated by the strata in which they're found geologically in terms of this kind. And it's a jigsaw puzzle. And people are saying, you look at the best preserved skull, you might see a part of the skull, the jaw is gone. Another find, you'll see a very good jaw, part of the skull is gone. Are they the same creature, or are they representatives of different parts of our evolutionary history? So it's a constant updating of the database on the available fossils. They're just, so it's fine to say there are millions or billions of fossils, but the point is there are very few of us. So you can either say that's evidence for special creation, because there aren't many fossils, because God didn't make many of the other models. He put all his energy into building humans, and just did a few test models and threw them away, and then built us, created us ex nihilo. But the current understanding on the part of those who are looking at the theory of human evolution is to say, no, there are records, there are reasons why the fossil record is fairly spotty, and what is the best inference we can make from that. And we do find, as we go back through time, the predominance of hominid species and then we go up to more ape-like species. And
100,000 of one.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm gonna hold the question. You can answer your first question.
I don't think he did answer the question.
Yeah.
I think he asked for some fossil evidence. He heard fossilization is rare, what things is fossilized, what can't. And that's frustrated me because I got all kinds of PowerPoint slides for all the different fossils. Okay, let's put a couple right here. Now, you bring up a good point. Imagine organism A evolves into B, evolves into C. I know it's simplistic, but we only have a few minutes. Supposedly, single-cell organisms are ancestors to invertebrates. That's the evolution model. There are billions, not just a few, there are billions of single-cell organism fossils. There are billions of invertebrate fossils. What's missing? The transitions, okay? And there's 3 billion years for them to show up. Why would you have billions and billions of A, billions and billions of C, and not one link of evidence for what? B. Decide for yourself. Did they exist? Maybe fossilization is rare for the transitional form. I don't think they existed. Invertebrates supposedly evolved into vertebrates. There are billions of invertebrates, billions of invertebrates. What's missing? The transitional form. And there's a gap of 100 million years for them to be able to show up. Why is the B missing? Okay.
All right, I think we're question for. Come on, all you USC students, bright, sharp, young minds.
Yes. Well, the main difference, once again, is an evolutionist would think that you have bacteria ancestors. Creationists think bacteria can only make bacteria. People can only come from people. My daughter is 6. When she was 4 years old, we talked to an adult, and she would say that. Then she'd look up at an adult and say, monkeys make monkeys, and people make people. Right? She's ready to debate. That's a huge If you really believe 100 of your ancestors could fit on the sharp end of a pin, if you believe that, is it because of science, logic, paleontology, biology, physics, laws of thermodynamics, or do you want to believe it? I wanted to believe that for a big chunk of my life because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I didn't want to think there was some creator out there who told me what to do and said what was right and wrong. I wanted to decide what's right and wrong. The theory of evolution to me, this is just me, was like Linus. What did Linus have that he was famous for in Charlie Brown? A security blanket. I worked construction. I know I'm a skinny guy. I worked construction with big, strong guys that were all Christian. They'd say, hey, Bill, Jesus loves you, has a plan for you in your life. I had my security blanket, and I'd say, I'm an engineering major. I'm glad that stuff works for you, but I believe in science. When I needed to take my little security blanket away was scientific evidence. And once that was taken away, I did seeking. I sought out all the different opinions, and here I am today. I'm strongly convinced that you are not the result of billions or trillions of years or trillions of chemical reactions by chance. The law of cause and effect. This is an effect. Was there a cause for it? Yes. Somebody made it to hold up my paper. The floor is an effect. Is there a cause? Yes. Something's for you to stand up. A very important question. Is there a cause for you? Now, an atheist would say, well, there's a cause for the lectern, a cause for your laptop, a cause for the light. put out a cause for people, Stephen Jay Gould called us a lucky biological accident. So that's the big difference between creation and evolution. Are you a lucky biological accident, or is there a cause for you? I think there's a tremendous cause for people, and it's worth looking into because it's the most important question in your life.
Well, at this stage of the debate, I feel like I'm probably an unlucky biological accident. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to explain it? We do, in fact, have a pretty good understanding of how single-celled creatures became multi-celled creatures. That we already see in multi-celled creatures, we find it convenient to live in families. Families find it convenient to live in groups. And if we look at the history of the human race, we've gone from creatures who live in small villages to creatures who, to a great extent, live in large cities. You may think that we were designed so that over the course of thousands of years we would go from village-living creatures to city-dwelling creatures, but you might also think there is a history. A number of things that happened in the history by chance that came together so that over time we changed from these relatively isolated creatures to these largely social creatures. Biology can give the same story for how single-cell creatures eventually became multi-cell creatures. And so that's how we begin the process. We don't have time for the full story, but how we begin the process of going from bacteria-like ancestors to simple multi-cell organisms and on the way to our common ancestors with the monkeys and the apes 20 million or 5 million.
Okay, we have room for one more question. Well, okay, we'll see if we get to it. Yeah,
This is for
Arbib.
The problem I have with the evolution creation debate is that creationists will flat out state we have a belief system. We believe this is our best guess of what happened, and they will treat it as such. Some will go so far as to saying it is a science, but they will say it is a theory of what happened to the best of our knowledge. The problem with what I see in evolution is that it's saying it is a fact. It is saying, if you watch PBS, you listen to National Public Radio, whatever, they all state evolution as a fact, and you're an idiot to disagree with it. Can we not agree that evolution is in fact a theory, and debate it as a theory, not as a fact?
It depends what you mean by theory. I mean, let's go back to Newton. Newton was a theory of how the planets move, but it could explain things in incredible detail. Later on, we discovered that things were moving very fast. We had to add corrections. Einstein's theory of relativity. Things were very small. We had to add corrections. The theory of quantum mechanics. But nonetheless, the theory wasn't a theory in the sense of, oh, it's your choice. Look, I mean, suppose somebody comes to you. You're the boss of an airline company, right? And they come to you and they say, I'm from Creationist Airplane Works. And we don't believe in aerodynamics as a theory. I mean, we believe aerodynamics is just a theory. It's just a matter of opinion. We actually have a quite different view. We think that, birds were designed by a designer, and we feel that if we study hard, we can sort of understand that process of design, and we can use that to design airplanes. And how many of ours would you like to buy? What would you order? I don't think you buy them.
No.
So the point is that science doesn't claim absolute truth, but at any time it says, given a huge body of facts, we've marshaled them. It's not just we say, oh, having a designer explains everything. It doesn't explain anything. Because if you want to make a numerical prediction, say, look, how thick do I have to make that wing? How much thrust does that jet engine? Saying, I need a theory to help me. The theory is absolute. The theory has just proved itself again and again to give me excellent numerical predictions. So I don't deny it may change this. So evolution can explain so many detailed facts. It doesn't explain everything. It's changing. Stephen Jay Gould has a theory somewhat different from Richard Dawson. Other people argue with them. There will be a new version of the theory. We talk about neo-Darwinism. We don't talk about Darwinism. He wasn't exactly right. So if I'm giving a PBS special, I'm not going to say, if I'm giving a PBS special on Newton, I'm not going to go into the fine details of the mathematics and then talk about quantum mechanics and so on. I might be giving a documentary on Newton and say, look at all what great things he explained. Isn't he a great scientist? So if I were doing a special on evolution, I wouldn't say you'd be crazy not to believe it, but I would just show you how many things it does explain. And yes, if challenged, I would explain it. Yes, we're in the process. There are many things we can't explain. That's fine. That's life.
Thank you.
And briefly, regarding PBS, they did a series on evolution, and because I'm a great guy and you guys are wonderful too, I'm going to offer everyone here a free book, 200 pages thick, that refutes it point by point. This is such an important issue. You got to get the facts. On your way out, get the book. It's free. The guy's holding up there. He bought one. He didn't know I was going to give him away. Okay, Dr. Arbib says a couple things that are important. He said evolution answers things, and there's a huge body of facts. Again, I'm not being arrogant or mean. I haven't heard any facts. He brought up Lucy, Australopithecines. I haven't heard any other facts. Where is this huge body of facts? And he talked about the airplane. The airplane is a design. It's the result of plan, purpose, and intelligence. It's not the result of chance. Once again, if there's a huge body of facts, it's a shame that we didn't hear them here tonight. Well, let me sketch because I got about 10 seconds. Once again, the checklist. I didn't see any answers to any of these. They're attempts. Marin energy, stars, life, mutations. Let's see some mutations creating a new organism. How did meiosis originate?
Okay. One more question.
For
Morgan.
Morgan, it seems like your creationist theory concentrates on disputing the evolutionist theory. Was it possible just because you're refuting evolution doesn't mean that creation is the right theory, no?
Absolutely.
Because you're refuting B doesn't mean A is right. It could be C, it could be something unknown.
Absolutely. It could be.
Yeah.
We're looking for the best explanation, however. Evolution may have happened. If it did, I don't see any living evidence, I don't see any fossil evidence, I don't see genetic evidence. If evolution happened, this should not be the scenario. You got an ape in the cage, and you're paying $40 to see that ape in the cage. There should be things walking around getting a $20 discount because that's close cousin. Where's all the living transmission? There's all the fossil evidence. It's proof. You know, evolutionists will talk to you depending on how much you know. If they find out you don't know much, they're saying, it's a fact. If they find out you know a little bit, they're saying, we're working on it. So, it may have happened, but the best explanation is what we're looking for. Once again, let me get that. The first law of thermodynamics supports creation. Not ashamed to say that. Second law supports it. Biogenesis, the cell theory. All of these fields of science support creation. When you fall in love and get married, you can only make a human being. If you get mutated, you're going to have a mutated human being. And that is genetics and biochemistry. Not the least bit ashamed to say that we strongly support creation. If there's another explanation, there should be evidence for it. It's a very good question.
Well, let me just tell you what I'm working on at the moment. I want to understand why it is that we humans are able to learn language that no other creature is. Now, I could just say, well, I can take early retirement. The designer designed us to have language, end of story. In fact, I spent a lot of time talking to neurophysiologists comparing brain function in humans with brain function in monkeys. I spent a lot of time talking to primatologists talking about communication systems, kinship systems, and so on in bonobos, chimpanzees, monkeys, and other creatures. And I find many, many similarities. I could stop there and say again, this is evidence of economical design. But my work at the moment is to try to understand by inference what our common ancestor would have been within that general framework of the evolutionary tree, and try to understand what process of mutations, what selective pressures could have led us from that common ancestor to who we are today. I believe that in the end we can understand our humanity and accept that the theory of evolution is not a final theory, but an excellent framework for biology.
Okay, we want to thank Professor Arbib for coming today to share this debate. I'm sure they might be available for some more personal questions, but unfortunately, this room has to be vacated, so if you want to go out, there's some literature out that the Christian Club has, and you're welcome to that. Thank you very much. Don't forget your book.
do.